Greetings. If you like Apple products and Apple technologies, then this is the video for you. Today we're going to look through the history of some of Apple's handhelds and see how they demonstrate a tremendous manifestation of technological miniaturization, unification, and dematerialization, which are all elements of computational progress and technological progress. And to see that, we start at the beginning of their handheld history. Now, this is not the very first handheld that Apple Corporation has ever made, but it is noteworthy in terms of being at the very start of the 21st century and the beginning of something much larger. We go to the Apple iPod that you can see here, and it was started on October 23rd, 2001, which was a time, I can tell you, when nobody was thinking about technological progress because the world was in the midst of the dot-com bust. All kinds of technology fortunes vanished, and the United States was also hit by a major terrorist attack just 6 weeks prior, September 11th, 2001, and all of the news media of the entire world was nonstop devoted to coverage related to that incident. But on October 23rd, 2001, Apple Corporation, led by Steve Jobs, released a product called the iPod. Other such products were launched before this by other companies that tried to create a portable music player, but Apple knew how to do this because it required a point in time where storage, processing, speakers, batteries, and all other necessary components could be unified into one small device for a certain size and price point. Think about how many things had to come together for a product like this to exist. It had to be efficient in its power consumption so that the battery lasted for a significant amount of time. That also meant it had to be efficient in its heat dissipation. This is a product that was to be in a person's pocket. It could not be allowed to get to 300 degrees because that would not work for a pocket product. You also had to have the storage, the computation, and everything else around it, including the iTunes marketplace where you could purchase songs for $1 each. You had to get past the model of CDs or cassettes for songs because those were incompatible with a portable music player that kept all of its music as software in some solid state storage rather than a tape-based or optical storage. So all the unification of all those various technologies had to exist for the iPod to start. And it didn't start selling a huge amount from the first day. As we scroll down this Wikipedia article, you see the iPod sales chart. Now, this lower chart is the annualized number, which is more important to us. The upper chart is quarterly, and it's only important based on what type of models were released when, and you can see a progression there. But we're going to talk about the timeline of introduction of various models slightly later in this video. So even though it was launched in October of 2001, sales were very minimal even through the end of 2003 into 2004. It only started to take off by 2005, and it reached a relatively high number by 2008 and 9, and then started to decline. And the decline is what we're going to talk about because the decline is, in fact, the essence of this entire video. Now, if we go back to the main article, and we go to this timeline of iPod launches, you can see the Classic is the one that started in October of 2001, and other Classic models were created, third generation, fourth generation. The Shuffle was created, and more advanced models like the Touch only came into being by 2007, 2008. And as sales declined, more and more models were discontinued. The Classic was discontinued in 2014, and other models shortly thereafter. And now, as of 2021, only the Touch 7G is being manufactured and sold. All other versions of the iPod have been discontinued because they're technologically obsolete. Now, why did such a successful product become obsolete? Well, that is the crux of this video. Unification never stops, and consolidation, miniaturization, and dematerialization of technology also never stops. Because now we get to this chart over here. This is a chart of not just iPod sales, but of the sales of a subsequent product that was even more advanced, the iPhone, and later the iPad, the tablet device. And this chart does not start from 2001, but the curve that we just saw a minute ago about the iPod sales and the peak in 2008, 2009 and decline, well, that is superseded by the sales of the iPhone. Why is the iPhone rising when the iPod is going down? Because as more and more versions of the iPod became more advanced, it became a victim of its own success, so to speak, in that the material product, the iPod, became redundant. It got fully consolidated into the phone. Everything that the iPod could do, including even the most advanced version, the iPod Touch, became a fraction of the iPhone. And the iPhone contains not just everything that the iPod can do, but so many other things as well. And we all have smartphones, and we know how many different functionalities and former standalone devices have vanished into the software of the smartphone. It's truly one of the big technological revolutions of our time. And there's great beauty in a chart like this. Very few people have the sophistication to understand how profound the information on this chart is. The iPod came into being out of nowhere, as I described, because a number of technologies could be unified and brought down to a consumer price point and therefore could sell at volume. But that process never stopped, so that device itself became commoditized enough that it could vanish into a more advanced device known as the iPhone, and the iPod started to go away. And now every single iPhone has everything that the most advanced iPod had, and a whole bunch more. Now, even the most advanced iPod comprises just 10% of the things that an iPhone does. And this chart ends in 2018 because the point is about the disappearance of the iPod into the iPhone and or the iPad. Now, this phenomenon transcends individual models of an iPod or an iPhone or an iPad, because going from the 6th to 7th to 8th or 9th generation is assumed to just be part of this natural churn process. Each version gets more and more advanced, and therefore you get an increasing amount of consolidation that is possible within there. Now, Apple, because of its success, has not chosen to keep lowering the price of its new phones because it has such a brand premium, and it has understood how to market to non-tech people in a way that other tech companies have not. So their phone has become a fashion accessory. They've also been able to sustain the knowledge of how to do this long after the passing of Steve Jobs, because he died about 10 years ago, and there was a fear that after he passes, sure, the projects he was working on could still continue for a couple years more, but after a certain number of years, his very specific talent and knowledge would no longer be able to have any residual momentum after his death. But apparently that's not the case, because Apple, at 10 years after the death of Steve Jobs, is now the most valuable corporation in the world at $2.4 trillion. But back to the concept of dematerialization, consolidation, and the vanishment of hardware, that is not specific to Apple. It's just that this chart happens to be very convenient. Android phones are the same thing. All these other devices that you used to buy independently, the clock radio, the calculator, and 20 other things are now found in one individual phone. And the price of the entry-level phone is getting lower and lower even as the features get higher and higher. So this type of dematerialization and consolidation is ongoing. And we see this in other technological areas as well. The cars of today have a tremendous variety of electronics in them themselves. They have USB ports, they have cameras, they have all sorts of things that would have been unthinkable in cars of the 1990s or even early 2000s, because under atom principles, there is always this continuous consolidation and dematerialization and unification of technology. But Apple products tend to be a very good place to look at this sort of phenomenon because of charts like this. It is something to really observe in the world as that is happening across all sorts of other technologies as well, as we will examine in other videos as well. So if you found this video interesting, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, and thank you very much for watching.